My buyer, Tim, when he bought his last house, 100% needed to have buyer's representation, but he didn't. He decided this was his fourth or his fifth time buying a house. He found a for sale by owner and he didn't need an agent's help. Man, was he wrong. This is your daily jumpstart here on Recharging with Champions. I'm your host, Charlotte Harrill. And Mondays, we tell a story, Monday memories. And today's memory is about why buyer's agents are so important in a transaction. Now, as a lender, I see this regularly where I have buyers that don't have representation, and it 99% of the time does not go well because there is no buyer's representation. There is no person protecting the buyer and making sure that they're getting the right things, the right contract items done. And Tim was a perfect example of this. So let's go back to his story. Again, use my story if you don't have a story of your own, or use your own. And you probably have a friend or a family member that thought they could do it on their own, and you saw how that went down. All right, so let's jump right in. So Tim had gone under contract on this house. The seller had decided how much the sales price was based on what they thought the value of the house was. All the agents in the room just went, ooh, yeah. Most sellers have an inflated idea of what the value is. And the buyer, having no knowledge of the neighborhood and what was selling, and they didn't have MLS to know what the purchase prices had been going for in this neighborhood. They just wanted to be in this neighborhood, accepted their asking price. So here I get involved, and now we are down the line and we're ordering the appraisal. And we had a really uncomfortable moment where the appraisal came in $65,000 low. That is a very large discrepancy. So those sellers didn't know what was out there and what things were selling for, what a reasonable price was. And the buyers didn't have an agent saying, whoa, 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 this is way overpriced. We don't want to offer this much. So we also didn't have a negotiator to help between the seller and the buyer. And we also found out they actually worked at the same company, which just made this whole thing way, way, way uncomfortable for everyone. And at the end of the day, they basically came in and the buyer ended up paying $35,000 over appraised value in this situation because they didn't want to walk away from the house. And the sellers, without having any checks and balances, understanding what their house was worth, was not willing to come down. So that buyer ended up paying out of their own pocket $35,000 to make the transaction work. That was just step one in the nightmare. Step two was when the inspector got to the house and the seller and the buyer and the inspector, all three walked through the house together. That was not fun. That isn't going to give any clarity and probably put the inspector under some unnecessary duress. And at the end of the day, everybody walked around away feeling really bad, which should not be the case after an inspection. Yes, you're going to have some things that you need to go back on. You're going to have some things you want to negotiate on. But if you're sitting there with the seller and the buyer and the inspector there, it was just like this the entire time. So by the time we get through the inspections and the appraisal, we already have a buyer and a seller who are not communicating well at all. And then we didn't have the third thing was we didn't have anyone scheduling the closing. Bringing everybody together is important. And the seller didn't realize that they needed to do this. The buyer didn't realize they needed to do this. So when I call and I'm like, hey, we're clear to close. Have you guys worked with the title company? Their answer was no. And then we ended up having to delay closing because nobody had taken those steps to actually schedule the closing, which is something that your agents do. They make sure everybody's on the same page and can get there on the right time to go to closing. Needless to say, having a buyer's agent and having agency representation in a huge purchase is really important, not just to unlock doors, not just to sign contracts, but more than anything to negotiate those tough situations and maybe stop them before they even happen. So that's my story. True story. Happened about 3 years ago for one of my high end buyers. And I will tell you, as a lender, I have a plethora of stories where buyers needed representation and they didn't have it. So I can actually give you more if you need it. Good luck on your marketing today. Let's just go out there and post a video. This is a great story to tell, and I feel like you probably know somebody that has been in this situation. If not, steal my story. Remember the toolkit. I do have a graphic. If you don't want to actually make a video, I've got a graphic for you in the toolkit. Use that. But let's get some social marketing done and let's make sure we share the real value of a buyer's agent.